Hello and welcome to the Week 8 edition of the Draft Report. My name is Matt Brown, brought to you as always by DFSreport.com. Head over there for all the great articles. Got tons of NFL, tons of NBA stuff, even some hockey stuff coming soon. We're going to have golf. We're going to have MMA. Going to be lots of great things going up on the site. So be sure and head over there, DFSreport.com. And of course, if you want to play at draft this week, be sure and download that from your favorite app store, whatever it might be, and use the promo code REPORT, REPORT, and you will get a free $3 entry upon your first deposit. Looking here at the quarterbacks for Week 8, there's going to be a much smaller pool, and there's a lot of teams on bye, guys. Looking here, I mean, we got the Cardinals, Packers, Jaguars, Rams, Giants, and Titans all on bye this week. So going to have a little bit of slim pickings here when it comes to basically all the positions. Lots of guys that we would normally be using here on those teams on bye, which is even more reason to play daily, right? This is even more reason to play daily fantasy than it is season long, because I'm sure a lot of you are looking at your season long teams right now going, oh, crap. I've got like 9 guys on bye this week. How am I even going to field a team? Well, fortunately for daily, you don't have to worry about that. If they're in the player pool, they're able to be picked this week, and you'll be able to field a team with no problem. Looking here, number one overall quarterback on the week to me is Carson Wentz at home against San Francisco. San Francisco has 3 of the worst corners you're ever going to find. You can see they've just been getting roasted all year long. Carson Wentz has been really, really impressive. Probably my MVP of the league through this, first half of the season so far. Everything he's been able to do. Really love Carson Wentz this week. And what I really love about this guy overall is he lifts his floor so incredibly much because of his running ability. I'm sure you guys saw last week, it looked like he was about to get sacked. He burst out of there, went for about 30 yards. This guy certainly has 40, 50-yard rushing ability in a game, and certainly has, touchdown upside with that as well. So lots to love about Carson Wentz. And, the one thing to look at here is well, they're playing a team that they're 13-point favorites at home. Could this get out of hand and they throttle back? And the only thing I would say to that is if they get to a point to where they are really hammering San Francisco, it's likely because it's been on the arm and legs of Carson Wentz anyway. They don't have much of a run game to speak of. So Carson Wentz is probably going to be the guy that gets you to that point. So I think you're still going to, even if it is only, three quarters really of him with the foot on the gas, I still think you get what you're looking for out of Carson Wentz. So my number one overall quarterback on the week. Kirk Cousins, I like this matchup here with Dallas. I think that both sides of this are very, very viable. One of the things about Kirk Cousins here is it looks like for the first time in a little while, he basically has all of his weapons at full strength. Sans the whole Terrell Pryor thing, looks like he's going to be benched because he just hasn't been very good, but that doesn't really matter. In steps Josh Doxson, who is a college, absolute stud and superstar. They're running three different tight ends out there right now. Jordan Reed seems to be clicking. Chris Thompson in the pass game. Kirk, just so many weapons for Kirk Cousins. So definitely love me some Kirk Cousins this week. And Dak Prescott's basically just shown consistency each and every single week. He's a guy kind of like Carson Wentz that increases his floor with what he does with his legs. And this matchup certainly shouldn't slow him down at all, even with as much as he's getting from Ezekiel Elliott, because Ezekiel Elliott is helping out in the pass game as well. A few other guys to keep an eye on here. Russell Wilson at home against Houston. Houston's defense is certainly nothing of that Houston defense that we think whenever we think of Houston defenses. They're missing so many key parts to that defense. That Russell Wilson at home coming off of a game where they kind of stumbled for a good bit of it against the Giants and then finally got it going there. A couple of big drops as well, so it kind of hurt Russell Wilson's statistics. Jimmy Graham dropped a touchdown, dropped another big pass for him there, so would have had a much better stat line if you're looking at Russell Wilson. Tyrod Taylor going against Oakland. Oakland just getting thrashed in the secondary all year long. Tyrod Taylor, you're going to look, and it's not quite as appealing because he doesn't have a ton of guys to throw to, but like the other guys we've talked about in Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz, he's another guy that can get it done with his legs as well. He's getting you 30, 40 yards a game. That's a passing touchdown. He's throwing for about 220, 230, 240, something like that. Going to get in the end zone with someone. And against this, like I said, a bad secondary here, certainly a guy that I'm going to be looking at early and often this week in my drafts. But this is going to pain me to say, but a guy that I have really high on my list this week is Andy Dalton. And you're going to say, wow, I hate myself if I click on Andy Dalton. And listen, I'm with you. I hate clicking on Andy Dalton as well. I hate having to root for Andy Dalton. I hate having to watch Andy Dalton play. But this week, we have to go with the numbers here. We have to go with what we know. And what we know is the Colts are ranked 30th in pass defense DVOA. The Colts are 31st in passing yards allowed per game. The Colts are 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. They are dead last in passing plays allowed of 20 or more yards. And if this doesn't really solidify this for you guys, the Colts just allowed 330 passing yards to one Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles, of the guy that likes to throw it to the other team more than he likes to throw it to his own team. Blake Bortles looked like a Pro Bowl quarterback against this Colts defense. They just lost Malik Hooker, their only guy with a pulse on that defense as well. So even worse outlook for the Colts this week. So for me, Andy Dalton, as much as I hate it, going to be getting clicked on this week, and it just is what it is. We're playing the numbers here. We're playing the matchup, and this is how we have to go. I don't have to sell you on Drew Brees. Drew Brees going to have another great game at home against the Bears. One guy I think I do need to sell you on a little bit is Cam Newton. He looked horrible. I think the weather had a little bit to do with that in Chicago. The offense really wasn't clicking here, but now he gets Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay really, really rough right now. Going to miss some key players in this game. I think Cam Newton has a bounce back spot here. Not going to love clicking on him, but listen, Cam Newton, a guy, one of the things we like about Cam Newton is his rushing upside as well. He's had 8, 7, 11, and 9 carries over his last 4 games. And so that's what we look for in a guy like Cam Newton. You're not going to love clicking on him. I understand, especially if you're a box score looker. Just look past the box score, look at the matchup. Cam Newton going to have a bounce back week this week. Take a look at week 8 running backs this week. Oh, wow. I'm going to talk about Le'Veon Bell. Yes, I'm going to talk about Le'Veon Bell because Le'Veon Bell is basically getting all of the volume. And this is all we have to, this is what we look for here, guys, whenever we look at these running backs. Volume it basically equals production so many times. I mean, we look at a guy like, let's take a guy, for example, who I'm actually off of this week in Melvin Gordon. He's the perfect example. So much volume. He's incredibly inefficient. He does not do a lot with the touches he gets. He just gets so many of them that it equals up fantasy points for you. That's what we get with Le'Veon Bell. That's what we get with Ezekiel Elliott. That's what we get with LaShawn McCoy. These are 3 guys you should be targeting very, very highly in your drafts this week, if not 1, 2, 3 overall in this whole thing, because these are the 3 guys that are going to be getting tons and tons of volume, and all of which are in good matchups here. What you don't want to do this week is go out of your way to get to Melvin Gordon. Like I just said, I think this game against New England could shift to where they're going to have to pass a lot. I think New England's finally starting to figure things out. I think New England could get up in this game a decent amount, and with that, they're going to have to shift to the pass game. They're going to bring in Oliver because he's back healthy again, so they're going to take Gordon off the field. I don't think he gets the type of volume we're looking for this week. Kareem Hunt, another guy that I've been targeting very highly every single week that I'm going to back off of a little bit more this week as well. Tough matchup with Denver, and while Denver's shown some cracks here recently, they haven't really given up these monster performances, these monster games. And so for me, sure, if Kareem Hunt falls to me later in a draft, if other people are fading him, then by all means, you can pull the trigger. I'm just talking about where we normally look to get Kareem Hunt. I think this week we just kind of back off a little bit, let someone else take him with their first round pick or something like that, and we'll wait. If he happens to fall to us in the 3rd or 4th, sure, we'll take him then, but we're not going to worry about going out of our way to get to him there. Devontae Freeman, all the talent in the world. You think with this offense going up against the Jets that I would be super, super high on him. But, I mean, frankly, right now what I see from Steve Sarkisian is a guy that doesn't know how to utilize his talent there in Atlanta. I mean, it took until late in the 4th quarter for Julio Jones to finally get in the end zone against New England. Julio Jones been criminally underutilized in the pass game. And then you look at Devontae Freeman. We've seen games where he was been averaging over 7.5 yards a carry, and then you look and he has fewer than 10 carries in the game. They're just not using the talent correctly. They're not doing what they should be with this offense. And so for me, a guy that I'm not going to go out of my way again to get after. So I'll let everyone else go after Devontae Freeman, and I'll be looking elsewhere a little bit this week. Really like the Saints running backs. Alvin Kamara is a guy that I'm certainly going to be targeting. The Saints offense has kind of shifted. Drew Brees used to just drop back and throw 75 times a game, and that's just not the case anymore. He's got 2 very talented backs. Kamara, I think, is going to continue to play a big role in the pass game. You can see how electric this guy is. And then a guy that I am going to go out of my way to get to this week is going to be Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram against Chicago at home here for the Saints. Guys, listen, Saints are 10-point home favorites. And the reason why I bring this up, there is statistical data that backs up big home favorite running backs. They get up, they like to salt the clock, they like to run it down. And we've seen fantasy increases time and time again for guys that are big home favorites. Saints implied to score 28.75. That is their implied team total. Whenever we look at this, guys, that means they are 4 touchdowns in this game. Over 4 touchdowns. You have to think Mark Ingram gets one of those 4 touchdowns that they're projected to get. 56 touches over the last 2 games for Mark Ingram. 114, 105 rushing yards over those 2 games as well. And if you're wondering where he stacks up against the field, running back number 2, running back number 7 since the Peterson trade. That is the 56 touches. That is the 114 and the 105-yard games. And that is the RB2 and RB7 performances since they ran Adrian Peterson out of town. Like I said, Mark Ingram has actually been playing a little bit of a role in this in the past game as well. 9 catches over the last 2 games, which is something we certainly love to see. So got to love me some Mark Ingram this week, a guy that I will be going out of my way to get. I talk about some of these guys that I'm not. I will be looking at him. Another guy, if I'm here kind of like still lacking my last running back, it comes back around to me in the 4th or 5th round here. Talked about Andy Dalton. Got to like Joe Mixon this week. I mean, this is not a squeaky wheel situation, I don't think. I don't think you can be a rookie with his checkered past and them going out on a limb to take him in the draft and try to say that they're going to, try to appease him because he was saying he wasn't get the ball enough. I just think it makes the most sense here. And plus, if we expect that the Bengals are going to have a lot of scoring opportunities, then we would think that they're going to be inside the 10, inside the 5, which would also present a lot of scoring opportunities for a guy like Joe Mixon. So Joe Mixon is a guy I will be looking kind of later in my drafts to pick up this week. If I like Kirk Cousins and I like what's going on in that situation, I kind of got to like Chris Thompson this week against Dallas. And listen, we certainly want a guy to get more touches than he's getting about, 9, 10, 11 a game whenever it comes to that. But he's catching so many passes. I mean, just so many passes. And we've seen time and time again what he can do when they actually set one of these things up well. I mean, he can house a short pass like nobody's business in this league. So Chris Thompson, a guy that I'm actually targeting pretty heavily here. Jordan Howard, interesting situation. If you think that the Bears are going to keep it close, then you're going to like Jordan Howard this week because that's the only way they're going to be able to keep it close is they're having success running the ball with Jordan Howard. Mitch Trubisky threw the ball 7 times last week. 7 times he threw the ball. So, I mean, they're not going to just say, oh, here's the keys, Mitch. Just go to town, man. Throw it 40 times. They're not going to do that. It's going to be on the legs of Jordan Howard. So, again, it depends on how you feel like this game is going to play out. If you feel like this game is going to play out where the Bears keep it close, then you're going to want to target a guy like Jordan Howard because he's going to be a big reason why that game is close. Christian McCaffrey, if I like Carolina, if I think Tampa's defense is banged up, if I think Tampa's defense is vulnerable, then I have to like Christian McCaffrey as well. Certainly a guy I'm going to be looking at. Lamar Miller, a complete fade for me going on the road at Seattle. Certainly know what I'm looking for there. And Carolina's defense is pretty stout. Don't want anything to do with Doug Martin this week. And maybe we'll figure out how Oakland plans to use these 2 running backs this week. A little bit too risky for me this week. We always like to say, if you got 2 running backs from a fantasy perspective, you don't really have any. And that's kind of what we're got going on in New England as well. They have 4 different guys that they use in that New England backfield. Nobody that I'm going to be targeting New England this week either. Let's talk wide receivers here for week 8. And let's just start at the very top with the guy that we talk about every single week. We talk about Antonio Brown, but let's talk about Antonio Brown for a second here and not just glance over what's going on here in Detroit. He's going to be shadowed by Darius Slay. Now, Darius Slay is not a lockdown corner like we talk about with a Patrick Peterson or a Janoris Jenkins or some of these other guys that we really try to avoid. But Darius Slay does have a pretty good track record whenever he shadows guys and has been slowing guys down at least a tad. So it might, if anything, take a little bit of the volume away from Antonio Brown this week. Again, not something that I think we should just be running for the hills from, but maybe not my number one overall wide receiver. That would certainly be A.J. Green this week. I don't have to keep beating the drum for why I like the Bengals against Indianapolis this week. So obviously, A.J. Green, if I'm targeting a wide receiver, going to be my number one overall guy. I got to like me some Mike Evans this week as well. I talked about, how I do like the Carolina defense going up against Tampa run defense, but the Tampa the Carolina pass defense has been able to show a few leaks this year. Certainly like Mike Evans. Another reason to like Mike Evans is Jameis Winston basically just goes into I don't care mode and just throws the ball to Mike Evans at will. I mean, this is a guy that it doesn't matter if he's getting shadowed. It doesn't matter if he's getting double teamed. And we even saw one time earlier this season where he was triple teamed. Jameis Winston just likes to throw the ball to Mike Evans. And so I think he's one of the very rare guys in this league where I'm kind of going to push aside some of this other statistical information and just go with what I see with my eyes. And what I see with my eyes is that Jameis Winston forces him the ball 10 plus times a game. And so if that's the case, we have to keep him pretty high on our radar here. Julio Jones finally got into the mix last week. I do think the fog played a little bit of a factor into maybe why Atlanta was as putrid as they were, but still, Julio Jones, it was nice to see him get involved a little bit more in that game. So certainly like Julio Jones going forward this week against the Jets, just not super incredibly high. We haven't seen a Julio eruption game yet this year. Don't know if it's going to come this week either. If I like Cam Newton and I like that matchup and I like different things that are going on there, then I have to like his number one target in Kelvin Benjamin. Kelvin Benjamin going up against Tampa Bay. Look, Tampa Bay is going to be without cornerback Brent Grimes, and that's a pretty big deal for them. He's obviously their best corner. It looks like they might be without their other starting corner, McLean, so they could be without both guys here, which is certainly looking in our favor when we want to roster a guy like Kelvin Benjamin. And then we just run through the myriad of stats here that basically back up everything that we're trying to do this week. Tampa's giving up the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. They are also last in adjusted fantasy points per game allowed to the position, which in the adjusted fantasy ranking, adjusted fantasy points allowed rankings, they basically take in all factors and try to normalize so that it's not like, well, maybe they faced, six really, really good pass offenses or something like that in a row. That's not the case. This is where they normalize it across the deal, and basically they are still giving up the most fantasy points per game to the position. Tampa has allowed double-digit fantasy points to 13 different wide receivers so far this season. Let me repeat that. Double-digit fantasy points to 13 different wide receivers. Tampa allowing the second most red zone trips per game in the NFL, and that is very important to us as fantasy players because when they get in the red zone, that gives us the best opportunity to score, and that is what we love to see, Tampa giving that up. Kelvin Benjamin certainly can take advantage of that, a huge, big-bodied wide receiver, and Tampa's the only team to allow at least 250 pass yards in every single game this season. Everything adds up towards Kelvin Benjamin having a big game this week, so I'm going to be looking his way early and often. If I like Drew Brees, his number one target, Michael Thomas, certainly a guy I'm going to be looking at, but let's keep an eye on that injury report. Had a little bit of a knee issue. Just want to make sure that everyone says everything's good to go, so just look at that on Sunday morning. Doug Baldwin, I think, goes nuts here against Houston. I'm a big fan of Seattle this week. I think this is a pretty big task here for this Houston team. Beat up on defense, rookie quarterback, going into CenturyLink Field. This just seems like a Seattle smash to me. Really like the Seahawks this week. Think they're going to do very, very well. Keenan Allen for the Chargers going up against New England. New England, up until last week, had given up 300 yards passing to every single quarterback they played, which means those passes, tons of passing yards getting passed around there. And getting passed around, getting tossed around, use all the words there, getting allocated to the different pass catchers there. So Keenan Allen, I think the Chargers pick it back up this week. Maybe Philip Rivers doesn't go for 300. I think 275, 280 is pretty much a lock here. And Keenan Allen certainly going to be a big recipient of a lot of those passes here. Dez Bryant against Washington. This really just depends on Josh Norman, whether he goes or not. Josh Norman doesn't go. Dez Bryant certainly gets a tick up in my rankings. Josh Norman does go, a big tick down. Dez Bryant, little bit older, not separating as well. And when he gets one of these big time cornerbacks, certainly not putting up the numbers that we're looking for. Going to be a fade on DeAndre Hopkins this week. Again, told you that I like Seattle. I think Seattle's going to play real well. I think Houston's in a real bad spot here. Going to be fading DeAndre Hopkins. Look at Steph Diggs is a guy that's going to be, looks like he's going to be going, right? It looks like Steph Diggs is going to be going over there in London. If that's the case, Cleveland, about as great a matchup as you could ask for. So keep an eye on that. Make sure Steph Diggs is a go. If that's the case, fire him up, because Cleveland certainly horrible when it comes to the pass defense. Pierre Garçon, here's one of those rare situations where we take a guy on a bad team and we say, wow, he's going to be an excellent play this week. And here's the reason why. If we think this game's going to go the way that's going to go, where the Eagles get up a lot, Vegas thinks so, they're 13-point favorites. Then the other team's forced to where they just have to throw every down. They cannot run the ball because they have to play catch-up mode. And when they're in catch-up mode, number one receivers just end up getting tons and tons of garbage time yards. Pierre Garçon was actually getting volume anyway. I mean, in this offense, he's getting tons of volume as it is. And if they fall behind tons, we should think that would add at least another 3 or 4 targets to what he's probably going to get in this game. So Pierre Garçon, a guy that I'm looking at pretty heavily. Oakland wide receivers, both of them, fire them up this week. Buffalo going to be likely without E.J. Gaines, their best cornerback there. Buffalo's actually been giving up a ton of yards through the air. Secondary's been shredded pretty good. Front seven's good for Buffalo, been holding people pretty well, but secondary certainly giving up a lot of looks there. Definitely like me. Both of the wide receivers there in Oakland. Alshon Jeffrey, probably the guy that you haven't rostered all season long that has the chance to really blow up here. We keep talking about San Francisco and how bad they are in the secondary. We keep talking about how they're huge favorites here. They're going to put up a lot of points. Alshon Jeffrey finally has a good matchup. If you take a look here at what Alshon Jeffrey's been up against so far this season, you can kind of see why his numbers have been a little bit off here. We take a look at these matchups. In week 1, Redskins and Josh Norman. Week 2, the Chiefs and Peters. Week 3, Giants and Janoris Jenkins. Week 4, he's got the Chargers and Casey Hayward. In week 5, he's got the Cardinals and Patrick Peterson. So, I mean, he's been having brutal cornerback matchups just over and over and over again. Finally gets a cush matchup. Finally think he goes off for you and think that he's going to be a real big player for you. In draft, we don't typically like to go after number 2 wide receivers, but I think there's a couple of different situations where you can look that way. Again, we keep talking about this Philly offense. Nelson Aguilar is certainly a guy I wouldn't hate playing this week. Again, I think a lot of points going to be put up in that game, and I think San Francisco's secondary is that bad. And secondly, Juju Smith-Schuster is a guy that I think you can look at here. We talk about Darius Slay, who's going to be on Antonio Brown. That might funnel some targets Juju's way. Martavis Bryant got demoted to the practice squad, not going to play this week at all. So Juju's going to be the second wide receiver. When they line up in 2 wide receiver sets, it's going to be him. When they line up in 3, maybe every now and then they push him to the inside, but most likely he'll be on the outside. They put Eli Rogers on the inside. So I think he's going to play most passing downs here. So I think a few targets could get funneled his way. I think he might have a sneaky, really big week this week. So certainly a guy I'm looking at. And finally, Josh Doxson. He has supplanted Terrell Pryor as the number 1 wide receiver there for Washington. Getting looks, would like to see him get more looks, and Kirk Cousins certainly likes to spread the wealth, but Josh Doxson, if he is going to play as many snaps as he played last week, if he is going to be in a game where we figure has a potential to possibly shoot out here, I think Josh Doxson is a guy you could look at here in week 8. All right, that'll do it for the plays here in week 8 for the draft report. Be sure and head over to dfsreport.com for all of your NFL, NBA, soon to be NHL, hockey, golf, the whole 9 yards. We're going to have it all. We're going to have all the plays and picks and everything that you need over there. Head to your app store, download the Draft Fantasy app, and use the code REPORT, REPORT. You will get a free $3 entry to a real money contest whenever you make your first deposit. Guys, go out there, play in tons of drafts this week. All these teams on bye. You don't want to have to worry about your season long this week. It's going to be so much more fun to draft the players you want in draft. Good luck. We will see you again here in week 9.